Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Walter Bosley channel. And as you guys know, this is the first Wednesday of the month, and that means an episode of KILLIFORNIA with our friend Todd Wood. And this particular episode, Todd and I both have been excited about this because Todd's brought a very special guest, and we're going to be discussing this book of his, plus some other stuff that resonates with all this. But William Ramsey is the guest tonight on KILLIFORNIA. So let me bring Todd and William into the show. Welcome, Todd and William.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Good
to see everybody.
So let me see here. Get my glasses so I can see my card. I think, William, that the first thing to do is, for those who still may not know much about the infamous Aleister Crowley, how about you give us some basics from your perspective and your research on Aleister Crowley?
Well, I mean, I kind of went through and looked at a lot of his documents in private collections, special collections, but he was born in 875, died in 1947. He was from a very wealthy family. He was the only child and kind of grew up in luxury private schools. They would call them public schools in the UK, but he was part of the Plymouth Brethren, which was a subset. It was really an exclusive brethren, a subset of the Plymouth Brethren. People know Derby. So he kind of grew up in a kind of sterile religious environment, which he eventually rebelled against and ended up at Cambridge and really kind of took off and was interested in mountain climbing, poetry, and the occult. And really started off kind of moved away from Christianity and really kind of became a scholar of esotericism, global esotericism, really. So he was really had a first-rate mind and traveled the world. He was able to kind of travel and write at the same time. He's kind of an interesting guy to kind of trace because he's never in one place for very long. He's constantly moving from the UK, maybe to Switzerland to do mountain climbing, to India, to Mexico. So he's constantly bouncing around. And he actually is like noted in mountaineering history in not a good way. So he kind of blasted his reputation in India. And on the way back from one of his trips with his wife, he had this seminal event in 1904 in Egypt, where he said he received this book, the Book of the Law. And it eventually became the centerpiece of his religion that he called Thelema. And it kind of was a mix of like esotericism, ceremonial magic. And he kind of bounced around. He was in the U.S. during World War I as an active agent of the British Empire at that time. I saw you wrote a book with Richard Spence. I've had him on my show. So that's
yes,
Secret
indeed.
Agent 66. Yeah, so
Right.
Excellent book. So that's it. Then he ends up in Italy. He's kicked out of Italy by Mussolini. Then he's in France. He gets kicked out of France for being a spy. Ends up in Germany during the end of the Weimar Republic as Hitler comes to power. So he's in interesting places at interesting times. There's no question about it. And becomes the head of the OTO, which really was a German secret society, the Ordo Templi Orientis, I think in 1925, and kind of integrates his ideas into that and becomes really a heroin addict. He was never really he was in great health when he was younger, but he eventually had asthma and ended up in a boarding house in Hastings at the very southern part of the UK or British Isle as an old man, and died in 1947 at 72. But I think the interesting thing about Crowley, and I think that's what he intended to do, is really influence. He wanted to be very influential. He said that after leaving Cambridge, I'm going to be a light. I can't remember the direct verbatim quote that he made, but I think that he's referenced by, even us today are still talking about him, referenced by so many people in the culture and counterculture after 1947. People in the occult reference him, and people in the arts and music. And I did a whole book on that called Children of the Beast, where I kind of showed his influence of people that we all know, whether it's the Doors, Zeppelin, Beatles. I mean, it's really incredible how many people went through a Crowley phase. So that was really kind of my book. That was that's basically Crowley as you have it. Yeah.
Do you, coming away from all your research on the man so far, do you see him as particularly an evil person, or how do you see him? Where do you classify him?
I think so. I mean, I think that's the title of my book, Prophet of Evil. I think he saw himself a prophet of a new age. He deliberately wanted to overthrow Christianity that he hated, that he was brought up in. So he was going to call it Crowleyanity. And I have a quote. He was talking to a writer called Clifford Bax in Europe, and he said, at the end of this century, people will be basking in the sunset of Crowleyanity. So he was, he was very ambitious in his early life, constantly writing. So I would say put him. My perspective as a Christian perspective, I put him in the camp of evil. I think that his promises for people and what he tried to give, this freedom and detachment and man as God, is all kind of evil philosophy. And a lot of them, you can just see his wreckage of his life. The people that were around him, the people that followed him in the occult, met kind of sinister, like despondent ends if they went insane or committed suicide. So those are all in my book.
Do you do you see him? Well, then I think that answers my next question. Was a deliberately harmful evil, or do you see him as reckless with the magic and the occultism?
Oh, it's a good question. I think that I think he got his kind of some of his powers from what he took in opposition to Christianity. He actually said, I never actually disputed its tenets. I just fought against it. And he really kind of overthrew. So he was definitely, if you read the world's tragedy to Crowley is Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. And he wrote that play to have him, this kind of magician who sacrifices babies to supplant Christ. And he included a lot of the defamatory, salacious lies told about Jesus in the world's tragedy. So that's just one example. So he's constantly counterpoising his opinions against his perception of Christianity, whether it was right or not. We can talk about Darby, but a lot of these people, Darby's doctrines are pretty interesting themselves. So his perception of Christianity was tainted, I think, by Darby and his ideas.
Yeah, he was definitely his position on Christianity was well documented and often expressed, by him. That's a fact. Now, he's famous for the phrase, the philosophy, "Do as thou wilt." Do as thou wilt. And I think most people think that idea, that philosophy, originated with him, but actually that goes back to the days of the Hellfire Club, correct?
It predates that. It goes back to Rabelais. Rabelais had this kind of group of Thelema, and I think it's in Gargantua and Pantagruel. He had this traveling group that adopted that saying in French was "Ne se voudras," which is on the cover of the Hellfire Club. But yeah, it predates Crowley. There's no question about it.
Were there? I think there were. I'm trying to remember if the Hellfire Club was just in England.
Correct. Yeah, that was. Yes. The Hellfire Clubs were in they were called the Merry Men of Medmenham, and they had this one of them was the Exchequer. So these were the elites of the time. I think around Benjamin Franklin, who attended Hellfire Club meetings. But they were there's actually the Hellfire Club catacombs that still exist, and you can visit those. And they would meet there and basically do the kind of perverse rituals of their time. Maybe they were the skull and bones of their time, and bringing prostitutes, alcohol, and engage in all kinds of dressing up and dark stuff. I don't know if anybody's really got all that down. There's actually a couple good books about the Hellfire Clubs, but yeah, they were excellent. I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was.
One thing I can say I don't know. I was aware of Franklin, his association, but did he ever write anything or say anything about the Hellfire Club?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I know that he was the head of the first Masonic lodge in Philadelphia. So he definitely had a Masonic heritage, or he was definitely involved in that. How much of his involvement? He was a libertine, like for a kind of founding member of the United States. I think he liked the ladies and spent a lot of time with them.
That's what they say.
Yeah, during the Revolutionary War, there was one of his sons was actually fighting under the crown against the U.S. So he had a very colorful life. There's no question about it.
Interesting guy. And this, of course, is all part of that history leading up to the time of Aleister Crowley, and it was among his influences. Have you found that anything about Crowley? And as I ask this, we know that he would encourage such things, but have you found anything said or claimed about Crowley to be an exaggeration, or have you found in your research that it's all backed up and factual?
Something that he lied about? I mean,
well, are there any things you're aware of that people often assume about him or claim about him that actually, aren't true? Because a lot of times Napoleon Bonaparte was just classically trashed and character assassinated way beyond the facts and the truth, by British historians and the British at the time. I'm wondering if there was anything said about Crowley, that wasn't true that you found in your research.
Well, I think that's good. I mean, some people dispute his authenticity, whether he's an authentic occultist or he's determined or spent his life. They think one of the things that I've come across in 13 years of studying Crowley and being kind of publicly maybe in the anti-Crowley position when most people are pro-Crowley is that his whole life was an intel op, and that it started from Cambridge and never ended in 1947. There's no question that he was associated with the Secret Intelligence Service, according to Spence, but he also did weird things. He traveled to Russia during really kind of a heady time before the 1917 revolution, which was 1904, 1905. So that was just another element of him traveling around and doing stuff. He also was involved in sending letters to Ian Fleming during World War II when Hess made that strange flight to northern UK to try to facilitate peace. Like that's there. So people think that because of that the occultism was just some kind of flippant cover, and I don't believe that at all. I think that he was an asset in occultism. And I think there's there's a whole book to be written about occultists who are in the Secret Service, but they are believing practicing occultists. So Crowley, to say that, it's kind of rich to say that it was all a cover when he's doing things by himself, when he's doing workings by himself.
Sure. Yeah.
When there's nobody there to handle him, that he's branding these women on the chest with the mark of the beast. Like this would just be so fake and over the top. He's doing the Gerensis working and the Alamantra working and all these other things, and writing it down. Like he had a huge magical record that wasn't publicized. So like why would he be doing these kind of strange things that are associated with magic and occultism that never saw the light of day? And so I think that that's kind of one thing that I think is a misstatement about Crowley, is that he was all just a big act. He did go through a phase later in his life where he regretted itself, where you can see it in my book, Prophet of Evil. He's like, oh man, this is all a waste of time. What am I doing? Am I insane? So I think that he might have second guessed that whole thing. There's also, I've seen a quote recently that came out of this repository of Crowley information that's in the UK. It's the biggest one there. And it said like he was sending something to Jack Parsons, who he considered to be his number one follower in the US at the Agape Lodge, where he said, hey, all this magic stuff is a bunch of baloney. But that was in the time of his life where he was like frustrated at the end of the rope. But then there's actually, to counterbalance that, which really I think is important, is that even at the end of his life, he was putting together letters and teaching people about magic. And it's categorized in a book called Magic Without Tears, which he was writing almost all the way up until his death in 47. So and that's another example. Like he's supposedly running some intel op, like just talking to people about magic and actually working on what's known as the Thoth or Thoth tarot cards. So it's kind of absurd. I don't think it's a tenable position for people to have that. Everything that he was doing was just all intel. I think it's silly.
I agree with you on that. I think he was definitely every bit the occultist that we know him as. Todd, you had a question?
Yeah. Just because, you never know who's a newbie in like the chat, or no one knows certain things. Can you kind of give a brief explainer on who Jack Parsons is and his relationship to Aleister Crowley, just for anybody who doesn't know?
Parsons was from Pasadena in Southern California, and he kind of grew up with an interest in the occult too. He would talk to Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun was close at this kind of I think this outfit in Pasadena, and that which future became JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is almost like a college campus north of Pasadena now. But Parsons became interested in rocketry, but also the occult. So he kind of had this varied life, kind of like Crowley's interest in poetry and magic climbing or mountain climbing in the occult. Parsons was rocketry, and he was always in contact with Crowley. There's a lot of letters and things like that. And he became the head of Crowley's, like a Crowley lodge called the Agape Lodge. And eventually, accidentally, supposedly, or maybe intentionally, somebody killed him, blew up in Pasadena on Orange Grove Road, kind of a swanky road. But he thought of himself as like carrying on the work of Crowley. He had this follow on to the Book of the Law. He took the oath of the Antichrist. He was friends with L. Ron Hubbard for a time. They kind of shared a girlfriend who ran off with Hubbard. And Hubbard was also a Crowley aficionado, and he started Scientology. It was called Dianetics in 48, and then 50. And he thought he was carrying on Crowley's work as well. So there's this kind of the idea of like my book, like the Children of the Beast, is these people are the magical children of these other magicians. That's what magicians, and that's the way they think. But Parsons was associated with a lot of interesting people, and kind of like this environment in Southern California of science fiction and movies and a lot of creative type of people like that. Yeah,
I think Parsons is an obvious connection between Crowley and the United States military-industrial complex because of Parsons' legendary, rocket engineering status.
No doubt. I mean, these all there. It's interesting too because it goes all the way up to the future. At the very beginning, it was three guys. It was Parsons. They called themselves the Suicide Squad because they were always blowing stuff up. But it was Foreman, Parsons, and a guy from he was from Czechoslovakia, and his son married Maxwell's daughter. So one of the daughters of Maxwell is directly associated by family relationships to the Suicide Squad and Parsons. Parsons' friend. I can't remember the guy's name. It was Foreman and something else. I can't remember. But yeah, it's interesting. So
that right there has a lot of fascinating potential. I mean, what was their access to Maxwell, I wonder?
Well, they're very much, I mean, the Maxwells were very much in kind of in the tech environment, and she was. I can't remember which Maxwell. It wasn't Ghislaine, it was this other sister, but they were involved in some early database programs. And Robert Maxwell's real name was Abraham. He had a kind of a Czech last name too. It was Abraham Laszlo. So he went through a few name changes, but Maxwell himself was interested. He had his own publishing company called Pergamon Press. That's in the Bible. That's where Satan lives.
His throne, correct?
Throne, yeah. And actually, Hitler actually copied the kind of Temple of Pergamon for his speeches, which pretty scary. Yeah, Maxwell was involved in a lot of like scientific writing and things like that. He had a very interest and a lot of friends in the Mossad and a lot of heads of state of Israel too. So, and actually Parsons had a problem with Israel. Like he had a problem with the American government, and there's a lot of FBI files on Parsons about trying to figure out what he was up to. They couldn't quite get into the depths of his attraction and practice of Thelema, but they know that he was involved in possibly giving some of his technical information to the Israeli state. And records of that investigation still exist.
Well, let's go into your the book here, Prophet of Evil. I admit, when I first got my copy, yeah, there it is. She's holding it up for me. I jump right into things. I jump right into the middle. You know, Ray Bradbury used to say the best way to read a book, he was referring to fiction, but he said, jump into the middle, read to the end, and then go back and read from the beginning. And I have a bad habit being a researcher. I'm sure you relate to this, where, you know, you want to get to certain points. And I got to tell you, the first thing I looked at in your book before going back and starting to look at the previous stuff was this, and I didn't see it coming at all, but the numerology, the Crowleyan numerology, that's just glaringly right there in the 9/11 incident. And is this something that you stumbled upon, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I actually came to Crowley from 9/11. I was like an independent 9/11 researcher. Like I read about
okay.
Yeah, to 2004, I kind of realized the whole thing was a big intel scam. And so I just kept researching, and, you know, loose change. I saw loose change, and I was following a lot of people online. I kept seeing this number 11. I mean, the date of the event is September 11th, obviously. But I was like really trying to figure out this whole New World Order. Is this a legit concept? Are people talking about it, or is it just some kind of fantasy or fable or myth? And so all those ideas were going around. There was a guy, I think I mentioned him in my book. His name was Captain May, and he ran something called the Ghost Troop. He's passed away, unfortunately, but he was like a legit, you know, military guy. But he wrote an article like, hey, why are all these 11s around here? And I said, yeah, you're noticing a pattern. Like, he was a true noticer. And so I saw that. I'm like, yeah, what do these 11s mean? I have no magical background. I've never practiced magic. I mean, I'm part of the culture, American culture. So how much I've been unwittingly or unwillingly initiated into certain things is an open question, which is an important question. But anyway, I've never I watched things. I've read the Satanic Bible, the LaVey, just because I was curious. I was definitely a researcher. So I had this thing in my mind, like, what are these 11s in 93? And I actually remember, like, the Flight 93. I remember being in Vegas, and there's a guy walking around with a shirt on it with a huge 93, and he's dressed kind of like an occult, like all in black. And I'm like, what is that number? Why is that number here? And so I saw the numbers in 77s, and I just in my consciousness of doing a lot of research, it was like, okay, so this number has something to do with magic. This 11 number has something to do with magic. And then I found out that 93 kind of corresponded in Crowley's system to the gematria. So if you have the Kabbalah, a subset of the Kabbalah is gematria, which is transforming words into their numerical value and adding it up. And so I realized that Crowley had this 93, which was very important to him. It's really probably his prime number beyond 11. You mentioned do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's 11 syllables, 11 words. So he would write his stuff to have correspondent value, magical value. Like it goes on, into the, different realms or whatever, different magical places, I guess you could say. But anyway, so I realized 93, 11. And so then it led me to Crowley. And then obviously it just opened everything up. Crowley definitely believed in this new aeon. He believed in the New World Order. He didn't state it like that, but he definitely believed in aeonic change. He wanted to change into the Aeon of Horus. And that's kind of what the New World Order is, in a lot of ways, is this to facilitate change into kind of a new idea. So I could see how somebody who's behind this event, 9/11, would be interested in really not just the magic, but the philosophy of Crowley. And so that's kind of what led back to the book. And 11 pops up in, I mentioned earlier, the Book of the Law. There's a refrain in there, my number is 11, and that's the number of us. But it actually precedes, like we were talking about, the intellectual heritage of do what thou wilt. Well, 11 goes back to this group, and it's probably precedes that, but it was called the Golden Dawn, which Crowley passed through. It's a post-Masonic order. What that means is you go through Masonry, and then you kind of try to get into this group. And it had a lot of elites, really interesting characters, MacGregor, Mathers, Yeats, who was a famous poet from Ireland. who actually said like all of my work is based upon magic, and you can see a lot of his magical implements and stuff like that in the Irish National Library. I mean, Museum. But 11, there was a book by one of the founders of the Golden Dawn that had number, like the number 11 was a number associated with desolation and death. And so you could see how Crowley would like that. But it also had just all kinds of representations in the magical corpus, like the esoteric magical corpus going all the way back, because it comes together as like the hexagram and the pentagram, which is a 5 and a 6. And as a magician, you're supposed to, like, your magical practice is to bring the macrocosm and the microcosm together to you. And so that's 11 number you'll see all throughout common modern culture, really, if you look at Harry Potter or Tyler Durden. So 11 was very important, and then that's all written in this what I believe is a public magical event. 9/11 was clearly structured on so many levels, like psychological level, spiritual level, political level, financial level. They were thinking on it as a complex.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you. I think most of us who spend more than 5 minutes looking at 9/11, come away realizing, okay, this wasn't just a relatively small group of Middle Eastern terrorists. This was somebody else's hand. Do you find that? Because I think so, after looking at your book, that clearly somebody is a Crowleyite or a Crowleyan.
Thelemite, perhaps, would be.
A Thelemite. Yeah, I'm sorry. That engineered this.
Yeah,
because
I would
the
actually
numbers
say,
of the flights and everything.
Right. Though, if you read through the whole book, it's really a book about George Bush Sr. That's really, I would not put it in the title, but that's kind of like the hello, Eureka part of the book is really tagging George Bush Sr. as a Thelemite who knows a lot about Crowley and is really probably a magus at the highest level of kind of initiation past Skull and Bones or even Masonry. And I think just a second, let me just finish this one.
I'm sorry.
Because it's very important to tie Bush into this. And that is his famous New World Order speech on September 11th, 1990, 11 years to the day of the event of September 11. And if you think about how powerful these guys possibly are, and I do think they've been fixing elections for a long time. That means that the event is magically correlated to the prime number of magic, the prime number of the New World Order, which is in my book, and to George Bush Sr. specifically.
I was just going to throw in there, looking at your book, reading your book, and the material about when you get this look at George Bush, HW. I would say, what do you think about the theory? Because I would say, after looking at this, the theory that a lot of people dismiss, that Barbara, was possibly Crowley's child. You see what you present about George H.W., and it makes you wonder, what do you think about that?
Well, I've heard people discount it. They don't do a very good job, because those two met with very young age. And this is kind of like an elite arranged marriage. I think George Bush Sr. was only 16 and she was like 14 or 15. They're 2 years apart. And the timing of her mother being in France at the time Crowley was there fits up. And if you can just take a picture and go, this is Barb and this is Crowley. So. And you go, they look the same. It's probably a good question for AI, actually, is to see if these two are possibly relative. Because they ran in Russia, they ran all the pictures of the moon landing in AI, and AI said this is baloney, and it is baloney. The moon landing is total baloney, and a precursor to the moon landing is complete baloney and a precursor to 9/11 actually. And George Bush has probably got his hand in that too.
I find that interesting, the precursor to 9/11.
Yeah, just to go back to Barbara Bush, she is a very strange person. She had statements made like Crowley. She's very much an elitist like Crowley. Crowley was a classicist in the like. Died in the wool. Like, there was nothing about him, about the common people. In his writings, he said, have nothing to do with the dross of society, find a diamond and polish it. So he would he was a priest to the princes is really what it was. So it fits in that somebody like the Bushes or the Rockefellers would be interested in those ideas. And Crowley was in New York for 4 years, so he might have come across some of these other elites that we don't know of,
Well,
that isn't included in his biography, which is called Confessions. But at the time, Crowley was in Paris. He was always kind of coming and going, but he liked Paris. He'd kind of come across Hemingway and other figures. Somerset Maugham wrote a book about Crowley, but it was from their times in Paris. This is before Paris became a dump like it is now, like a third world or fourth world dump. It actually was the city of lights, and all the elites would want to go there to be part of the food and the culture and kind of literary head. It was kind of like a classy Hollywood back then. Like,
and some illumination under the surface.
Sure. And Crowley was there. He was with the guy, Harris was his name. He was kind of like a Sybarite like Crowley. And Crowley was doing something called ECL. He was doing just another one of his magic workings. I don't know if this is like, it's called errato-comatose lucidity. And his writings are so bizarre. There's so many weird things. But this is one of his ideas, which is to basically go into a kind of out of your body experience. But you would need servitors. You would need basically kind of like almost like a temple prostitute to facilitate the working. And the rumor is that Barbara Pierce, right? That's her maiden name. No, Barbara. It was, I can't remember her first name. Her real last name is Pierce. But was there with Crowley doing this and then got pregnant. And it kind of would fit in with Crowley's kind of idea about fatherhood, which is he would just, let's do it. I think he had 5 kids he never paid any attention to. One died. One he said, you'll make a nice prostitute. There was another one. This woman came in and McAlpine at the end of his life and said, I want you to bear my child. I said, sure. His name was Ataturk. And he kind of he was like sleeping on park benches and wearing Crowley uniforms. Like he didn't turn up too much. But it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility that Crowley fathered this woman's child.
You have to wonder with the occultism that that certain Nazi individuals were involved with, and when you look at Prescott Bush, to me it makes it even more possible that the marriage between H.W. and Barbara, and then him going on being put in the position and becoming president. If this, of course, wasn't all by design. I mean, people have assumed it was by design in other ways, but from this Crowleyan magical perspective, it just adds more fuel to that fire, wouldn't you think?
No doubt. And you can go see a picture of Barbara Pierce with her family. She's a genetic outlier. She does not look like her siblings, by the way. And she has kind of weird. Crowley was really Irish. He was actually he had kind of a blocky head. He had kind of a narrow shoulders, blocky head. He tried to cover up by wearing scarves and stuff, but she has that kind of big. I mean, if you've seen certain Irish, it's like a physiognomy of some Irish peoples. They just have big heads for whatever reason. Brilliant people, but I'm not trying to be mean or anything. But no. So she's an outlier. But a lot of those guys are into the occult. They're very bored. They're rich. And I mean, the Bushes are 3 generations of bonesmen. That's a secret society. People don't know some of the details about it, but there's full-on tombs. Crowley said Satan is the Lord of initiation. Those guys are all initiated. They're involved in masonry, House of the Temple in D.C. So it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility. That was an arranged marriage. It was kind of like something from Dune, like we got to get these 2 bloodlines together and and it would make sense to follow that through to the events of 9/11. Make perfect sense because the pieces fit together in your mind, but they strained credulity. Like you couldn't believe it. Like what? Is this really
except in the House Atreides, it'd be House Harkonnen, right?
Right. It's like, well, that's the whole thing is that Paul is a mix of both houses, right?
Yeah, right.
Like the Duke Harkonnen is his mom's grandfather.
Yeah. Right? This is dark on all sides with the HW and Barbara, I would think.
That's the way these people think, though. They're different. Sure. They're into breeding and the social register and all that stuff, not breeding on love. That's the whole thing about their relationship is like it was almost arranged. It's not like something where like we just met and fell in love like normal,
Right.
like the usual
Right.
standard people. Like, oh
Right.
man, I'd like her. I like him.
These are the people you'd see in Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. Good one.
The Bushes are princelings. They are from the Rockefeller lineage. They are the people who have served the Rockefellers in multiple generations.
Now
That's people really, they've kept it all covered up. Yeah.
That's really interesting that you said that, because Walter and I wrote a book called The Curious Case of Margaretta Todd. And interestingly enough, supposedly she was a von Hoffman from the von Hoffman paper mill fortune. And the von Hoffmans are related to the Rockefellers and Roosevelts and all that too. So I can definitely resonate with everything that you're saying right now.
That's not a joke. They keep it quiet. They don't want to know it. But really, the Skull and Bones is kind of like the dark arm of the WASP elite. Really, they have been involved in a lot of those guys are in business or CIA. Mm-hmm. So Bush, and some of these interesting books that are out there that actually they revealed is like George Bush and Barbara and their social, like it's not the foundations, it's their social cliques where there were clubs they were going. They were in every major elite club imaginable, not just the Bohemian Club or Yale. There are clubs that the average person has no idea, but they were in there dining, networking, talking to very powerful people. And one of the things that George Bush Sr. was notorious for was almost like Crowley, was his correspondence, constantly writing letters to his friends. They would send out thousands of Christmas cards. So he was very much socially networked, and he must have known. And his son was a prince. I mean, with George Bush Jr.'s whole background is a legend. It's an intel legend. It's totally fake. He's he's a princeling.
I'm glad you brought him up. It therefore with this background, and when you read this book, Prophet of Evil, folks, it's even further, as we already know, but further solidified. Is no surprise that 9/11 happened while Junior was in office.
He was selected. He was prepped. He's actually brilliant. He's a great actor. He's a first-rate actor. And I think his dad is too. Like if you see him with their open mouth, like grinning, these are all fake, like acting things. Like he'll come out like, he'll make these funny faces, but it's like an inside joke for them. And George Bush Jr.'s Texas accent is fake. It's fake.
Right. Well, you can't be an idiot and get in that office, folks. I mean, even Gerald Ford was not that big of an idiot. But let's get into because this was, I just found this, wow. A 9/11, the whole thing with the flight numbers, each one of the flights involved is a number linking to thelemic magic, right?
No, I think 93 is the real giveaway. 11 is generally associated with Crowley. It's probably most known in his system, to my knowledge, is the 11s. Mm-hmm. But 77 too is very important to him. It's like the number of his Liber 77, which is Liber Oz, right? It translates to Oz, which even gets even more interesting. But that thing says there's no God but man, and you can do whatever you want. And if anybody thwarts your will, you should kill them. Like that's literally what Crowley wrote. And that whole writing is actually fully kind of full of correspondences and magical thinking that's supposed to resonate through the planes or whatever. But yeah, so 77 and then 175, there's kind of in the common parlance of like Luciferianism. It's which God do you adore? And that's what 175, the ritual of 175 is. So you had the first plane to hit the towers was 11, which are giant 11, right? They're a giant 11 in the sky. 110 stories, right? Like, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is all done by intent. And it has the Typhonian kind of like trident underneath going all the way up to the sky. So it's like an FU to God. Like that trident is very powerful kind of, and it pervades kind of studies I've done in the Order of Nine Angles. But so the first plane was 11, then 175, which God you adore. Then 93 was the one that crashed supposedly in Shanksville. And 77 hit the Pentagon, whose groundbreaking date was September 11th, 1945. So you can these are somebody's thinking on these levels, yeah.
So you do think that Flight 77 actually did hit the Pentagon as opposed to a missile?
I think it was a missile. I think all the planes were switched out or something happened. Like they were doing all kinds of drills that day. I remember there was a guy saying, "Is this in real life or a drill?" Like they were confusing even the kind of air traffic controllers and other people. So I think that the planes got switched out somewhere in Ohio or something. So the flights came out of Boston, switched out. They couldn't leave it to chance. So they droned the ones into the towers and then hit the missile. It's totally nonsense because if you were really a terrorist, it was a straight shot right down from the flight path right into Rumsfeld's office. So instead, we got to get these accountants who are looking into 2.3 trillion missing. Let's get them. So, yeah.
And let's conveniently hit the part that there's been construction going on, so there's going to be a minimal number of people in there. Same as with the towers. It wasn't a full day, my understanding.
And they were going to have to take the towers down at a certain point. They were not set up to last for very long, which is somewhat telling. And it goes back to actually their foundation in the early '60s. Like who put that together? Who was there? I mean, there's a kind of a famous picture of David Rockefeller sitting in front of the towers being built, and he's got his arm up and his watch says 9/11. You ever seen that?
Oh, geez, I've not seen that one. That's really
so. That's the concept of the priest to the princess goes back. So these guys, like a lot of these ideas, they're shared with the elites, but the proles and people like that, they don't get exposed to that. They don't get exposed to that kind of elite occultism. Yeah. They don't even know it exists, actually.
Yeah, I wonder. I guess they just look at it, a guy like W and his dad, they just look at it as just a big fraternity, a special fraternity that they're in. Or do you see them as real sinister wizard type guys that are deeply into this?
Both. Absolutely, both. Absolutely. I think that they're into power. It's the Brotherhood of Death. I think they are all connected. They all know the secret signs, handshakes, statements. And they have changed the world after, it's kind of a strange thing because the Nazis really wanted world domination.
Yeah.
And they ended up really getting spanked or shellacked in World War II. And the U.S. filled that role much better than Hitler could have ever.
With the help of Nazis.
No doubt.
In a way, they now one really disturbing thought about the idea that the planes were switched out, which I definitely think there's that's viable, is the idea that what did they do with the actual planes? They landed them, took these people somewhere in a field or a hangar, and what did they do? Just gun them all down, and it's either fly them into a building and they die that horrible death, or they just coldly are.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible.
Exterminated,
It's horrible to think, yeah.
Or maybe flown right into the ocean, like flight, was it 1370, 370, whatever it is. So do you see, do you put much into, there's been folks, I myself have written about this on my blog. I'm definitely was not the first or the only one. The idea that 9/11 had a definite impact on the psyche of the American public in a magical way, but with what you talk about in your book, it even further argues that 9/11 was a blatant magical act, done on the public.
Absolutely. I think it was all, like I said, it's a structured event. And what I mean by structure is there's all these layers of thought going into it. And they probably war gamed it over and over. They knew the effect. They were trying to have the most impact on every kind of, almost like every spectrum of the world. The financial, the puts, the benefit, the knowing that the Department of Defense was going to get a ton of money, that the spigots would open, that they were going to have 0% interest rates. They pumped in. They were brilliant. They pumped up the entire economy from 2001 to 2008. That whatever happened, that crash was all done by intent. It was actually a banking war that benefited Chase Manhattan. Who runs Chase? What's Chase also known as? The Rockefeller Bank, right? So
indeed.
Yeah, so I used to have I was a member of Washington Mutual, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
didn't get the bailout funds, and I became a member of Chase. I was like, what? I woke up one day, I guess Chase is my bank because
Yeah,
somebody got money and somebody didn't.
the branch up the street from me, I remember when it made the switch over, we're going to be Chase now. I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? Absorbed by the Borg.
Yeah, no, very skillfully, very skillfully. So I do believe that it was an occult ritual. I think it was done as a human sacrifice.
Oh, and don't forget on the money part. What is it? The 20? Am I getting the number wrong? The 23 trillion, or is it 2.3 trillion? That
I think you said right. So that's the 2.3 is what 666, right?
Yeah. Well, it was the day before
23
Rumsfeld.
Enigma. Yeah.
Yeah, Rumsfeld is reporting on September 10th. Oh, we can't account for this money, and then of course the all the paperwork that could tell us about that, where it went, just was likely destroyed in Building 7, I think.
Right. It's the 23 Enigma is something that goes back to Burroughs too. So maybe they were having a little fun. But George Bush was at the Ritz-Carlton right there in Virginia, maybe even being able to see the Pentagon at the time with the member of the Bin Laden family. And where do they go to war against in 2 years' time, which is Iraq, which was Saudi Arabia's kind of was a pain in the side of Saudi Arabia. They were the Israelis and the U.S. and the Saudi Arabians and the Iranians were all on board with just destroying Saddam Hussein. I mean, the real history of those 8 years, like I lived through them, the real history is just almost unbelievable. Like people just couldn't believe the kind of things they got away with. But I think so the magical rituals there, but also one of the things that you have to remember is another thing that most people and not a lot of 9/11 researchers understand or consider is that George Bush came up in the CIA during all of these behavioral modification programs.
Yes.
It's not just MK Ultra, it's Artichoke.
Right.
And the real purpose of all of these sub-projects was to control society.
Yeah.
It wasn't the people make this misunderstanding like they're trying to find a mind control patsy. They are trying to find a mind control patsy, but they're trying to manipulate everything. We're doing drug testing. They're checking out all kinds of different philosophies, hippies. There's so much information. And so people think of it like the Manhattan Project, and you see this movie that came out where they did the Manhattan. There was the same type of thing with mind control. It was all over, like the Manhattan Project was distributed through so many different sections of the United States that didn't intentionally were compartmentalized. They didn't see the center thing. The same thing was going on with MK Ultra. The guys at the top knew what the results were, and they're hidden. But the guys, even like these crappy CIA doctors and psychiatrists, they were just doing the work and giving their information up to somebody at the CIA at the top. These guys at the top of the CIA, they know all that stuff. So they know how to traumatize, how to isolate, how to suggest things to people in the suggestible states. Bush Senior knows all that stuff. So when I say Magus and stuff like that, I'm not like overstating it. Like this is what happened. So exactly when that event happens, this traumatic event, 3,000 dead, Bin Laden, baby. Bin Laden, we got to go to war. And
they just hammered away at that. I was in the Middle East the day it happened. I was in counterterrorism for a number of years, and I was in the Middle East. I was in Amman, Jordan, doing my job when that happened, ironically. And what I've noticed, and I've talked about it a lot here, I talked about it then, there was this, to me, now I was somebody who I'd been in the FBI, I'm an Air Force officer, I was an OSI agent, my career was in national security, right? And to me, most of the patriotism that I saw emerge from that had this weird robotic artificial feel to it. It felt strange. It felt like this flag waving, everybody putting their magnetic flags on their cars, and this it was weird, and I came from a profession where there's a lot of patriotic people, and whether we're being used or not by the imperial machine, but I just found it to be I think a product of what we're talking about, this induced, forced rah America, so that they could get away with whatever they wanted to do with the military, with the industrial complex, and on and so forth. I think that was part of. In fact, I think that's what I'm trying to say is that's evidence and a sign that something magical was done on the psyche of the public with that.
No doubt. No doubt.
So it
no
was.
doubt about it.
It
And
was
they also instituted, when they caught a lot of these so-called terrorists, which turned out not to be terrorists, and were taken to Guantanamo, those people all got the MK Ultra treatment. You can go watch the pictures. Sensory deprivation, isolation. So people who think like, hey, that whole this is a lie that is perpetuated, which is a total lie. We shut the program down in 1975, and they don't talk about its application. They deliberately don't get that next question going. The application was at Guantanamo and other places. You can see those pictures. They're very easy to find out.
I've said it before. I've written about it. My audience knows this. The U.S. Air Force was the one branch in the 50s that really liked MK Ultra, and they have never had to come clean before Congress on what they did was they learned from the CIA, and in the late 50s they broke off and started developing their own MK Ultra program. They've never ever had to tell the public what they've done with MK Ultra since 1958. Think about that.
Same thing with naval intelligence was the same thing.
They
would hide their programs in different parts of this huge military industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
So when Eisenhower warns about that, people don't see how big it is. So it's a whole nother show. But these guys, one of the great things about Bush and what a rogue he was the shooting of Ronald Reagan. So they get into office in 1980, and within the first year, this guy who's obviously been tampered with takes a shot at him. It probably wasn't the guy actually shot, much like Sirhan. And who would have been president? George Bush Sr. And Reagan didn't want George Bush as his running mate, much like Kennedy didn't want Johnson. Yeah,
exactly.
It was like, it's politics, man. We got to do this. He's your guy. He's going to help you win. And it ended up turning up to be that George Bush Sr. pretty much ran that administration anyway.
Yeah, because what was it? By the second term, the age was beginning to affect Reagan. So
he's like a Biden. Actually, he's probably better off than Biden. Biden's probably. If that really is Biden out there, that's a 50-50.
Yeah, I think Biden is way beyond even what people even imagine Reagan was. Now, on 9/11, the fact that there were Middle Eastern Islamic players on the field in this thing involved, I never thought about this until your book and learning more about Crowley from this perspective. I'm guessing, or have you found anything from the Middle Eastern involvement? They have a long tradition of magic, like Sufism has occultism, and Crowley, as a young man, was a real fan and student of Sir Richard Francis Burton, who himself is an interesting guy. I've written about him, but do you see anything in here from the Middle Eastern magical tradition perspective, that would have played a hand in this 9/11 as a magical act?
Not off the top of my head, but I do know that Crowley dedicated his autobiography to 3 people, and one of them was Burton. So he really kind of emulated Burton in a lot of his adventuring and stuff like that. But as far as kind of Middle Eastern kind of magical act, nothing really overt. We know that the Hashashin is from there and modern day Iran, but whether kind of it came, I didn't see any traces, only in as much as Crowley kind of integrated maybe some of his stuff into that, but no.
Okay.
I think that the Saudis were on board with the event. I think that that's why so many of those people supposedly were from Saudi Arabia, is because there was a friend, Bandar Bush is like Bandar, I forgot his last name, but they call him like the other fifth Bush brother or whatever. But they have a tight relationship, and I think that was always very much cultivated with a good relationship with Saudi Arabians up until very recently.
Okay. Well, I want to, Todd, I want to get you back in here. I know you've got
Hey.
some questions in mind.
Oh man, I was just amazed. I mean, what a great conversation. We're so lucky to have William Ramsey on our show tonight. I mean,
Yeah.
wow. I mean, my mind is blown. I mean, you guys pretty much answered all the questions I had. You know me. I mean, I've emailed you about the 4P before. That's the main thing I like to research is the 4P. In the case that Walter and I are working on right now, that number 11 sure does pop up.
Which case is that?
This is a cold case from Southern California, from 1981. It's the Diane Brown case from San Bernardino. It's kind of an interesting case, but we're currently investigating it.
And just like with Rick Spence and I, the case we wrote about from 1915, we're still waiting to hear back from the closed case detective. This area it's interesting. Whenever you find a case that clearly has occult implications, well, it seems like the police department has a hard time getting back to you, or those records don't exist anymore. And, Rick Spence and I found that with the case we wrote about, and we're still waiting. We're doing some footwork here with Todd on what we're looking into. And I find it very interesting, and particularly from, you have the Crowley, connection to California, obviously through Jack Parsons, but I was able to, for the book Rick and I did, I was able to prove that Crowley had to pass through San Bernardino during the 1915 mystery. And I was able to prove that through the Southern Pacific Railroad.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because
is that in your book, Empire of the Wheel?
Santa Fe Railroad. I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah. Empire of the Wheel. It's because it was the Mexican War. See, they had all the rail traffic on the southernmost route. They diverted passengers off of that because Pancho Villa and them kept raiding across the border. So any traffic going between the West and East Coast of the United States from Southern California had to come through San Bernardino and take the route, which is now like where Highway 40 is, which is a little farther north than 10. But so we had Crowley passing through here directly during the middle of the mystery. And I have to tell you that I looked at this and I didn't find anything overt that suggested to me that Crowley would have had a hand in what Rick and I suspect here. But I do think, and Rick agrees, that whatever did happen here was one of the influences on his novel, The Moonchild, or Moonchild. When you look at when he wrote it, I know it didn't get published till 1923, but he started writing it in 1917, less than 18 months after he passed through here during this mysterious period. So and on his big tour, as you're well aware of, during the World War I period, he spent a fair piece of that in California. So it's interesting that he had interests here. It seemed to connect him to this place, and of course, California, I think, is known as the aside from being the nuttiest state in this regard, the probably the cultiest state. I think. No doubt. We're doing.
He's passed through California twice. He said that he just missed the California earthquake, the big one in 1906, on his first circumnavigation of the globe by a week. So I know that he popped through there, and then the other circumnavigation must have brought. I think he writes about it in Confessions, being in L.A., if I remember correctly. So
did Harry Houdini ever pop up in your research on this stuff?
No. But I remember Crowley kind of went through New Orleans. He was at the Absinthe House. I remember that. So I know he went from there to LA, so it would make sense of him passing through San Bernardino. He's coming to LA because he would have had to.
Yeah, San Bernardino was still a very big one, but for my gosh, better part of a century, it has been a major railroad hub, passenger and freight, and back then, big time. It was, like I said, it was this place was different. I see it as an area, a city, a valley that was assassinated, if that makes sense, assassinated with magic. And it's very, but that's in the mine and Rick's book. And I just, when I made the discovery that Crowley was in the area, and then when I looked deeper into it and realized he had to pass through here, it was just, it was mind blowing. And that's what led me to contact Rick Spence, because of his book, Agent 666. And I got more details from that, which led to me saying, hey, Rick, what do you think? You want to write this thing with me? So it is said, do you think it's true that I guess it's true that his last words were, I am perplexed? Is that true?
Yeah. That's what it's written. I think in my research, I remember that supposedly is what he said.
I am perplexed. And it's interesting that he dies in 1947.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Big date, huh?
Is that one of those happy accidents of history, or I wonder?
I don't know. Who knows? I mean, why did he write that whole thing about Lamb? Like, how did he put that together in the Alamo working in New York City in 1918? That all now is permeated the entirety of UFO culture.
Right.
Like it goes all the way through communion to the present.
Hey, William, I have a question. When he came to New York the first time, he came there as a sort of a agent working for the British, but was he associating with other occultists in New York?
I think so. He was looking back. It wasn't really one of the main parts of my inquiry into Crowley at that time, but he was aware of other occultists. I remember he was on a ship, and it was either Annie Besant he was on the ship with, but he knew, like, his travels through Northern California. He knew the guy who was the Rosicrucian guy, whose name I can't remember, in San Jose. So him being with other occultists is not outside the realm of possibility. He seems to have been trying to teach people occultism all the time. Right. He was kind of a pedant, in that regard, like just like constantly trying to school people. So there were other people. I'm trying to remember some of the names. There was like Walter Durante he was hanging out with, and slipped him some anilonium, and they call it basically it was mushrooms, like he's doing tricks on people. Right. So how much of those? I remember he was with the famous. He did a working with a famous actress at the time whose name is kind of lost to history.
Did the name Ingersoll Lockwood or just Ingersoll come up by any chance?
I could look at my copy of Confessions and do that. I mean, I think he mentioned so many people by name. Now, if I remember correctly, I have to go back and read Spence's book. Well, I would talk about it all the time. I'm always referencing it in my Crowley discussions. But Crowley knew so many people in like the intel community. He just mentioned so many name drops. He's a total name dropper in Confessions. Yeah. So you could just go up and look at Ingersoll in Confessions. But if that's my third edition of Prophet of Evil, by the way. That's wow. So yeah, I've rewritten it. I mean, the first book, I'll show it to you. It's pretty funny. I was actually popped it out because I published it in 2010. When I first published it, I was such a noob. I literally printed it out on my printer. I don't know. Let's see if I can see this. There's this.
It's doing that weird green screen thing.
Okay, watch this. I'll show you. This is actually my first version. Is on like a piece of paper. I see this.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah.
Literally a ring binder.
There you go.
That was like my original first cover. So
that is so punk.
Yeah. So literally people have this copy, like it's around somewhere. That was But if I redid my Crowley stuff and did a fourth edition, I would look into more of his intel ties, because you can cross reference those days so much, those names so much easier now. Right. With the internet that you could back then, and news articles. And things like that.
And now it's interesting that 77 is one of those Crowley magical numerology numbers, because the first Talking Heads album was actually called 77.
I'm not surprised. There's so many weird Crowley connections all throughout music and stuff like that. It's half of like the beast in the, so you'll see his Babylon sigil too, has the 77s all over. So it's some kind of reference to that. There's all in the Satanic Bible, there's 77 names of Satan, right?
Oh, wow.
So there's all that 70. Yeah. So 77 is like if you read my book at the very end, the George Bush section, his aircraft carrier's number is 77. So it's not, these are not accidental, man. The guy is a full Thelemite. I'm almost 95% sure. That was religion. It wasn't Christian.
Oh,
go ahead, Todd.
Speaking of the beast, 666, Satan and Lucifer. Before I forget, I just want to bring up the song of the month. The song of the month this month is "He Is" by Ghost. It's the perfect song that encapsulates our conversation perfectly. It's almost like a devotional to Lucifer himself. I highly recommend anyone in the chat or watching later on to go out and check out that song. Back to you, Walter.
Hey. Yeah, I was just going to say that, before seeing, your book and what we're talking about in this discussion, my question would be, okay, was Crowley just a pebble that, he dropped himself in the waters of time and he caused a ripple, but he's more than that, because if indeed he was Barbara Bush's father, and if HW was a Thelemite, Crowley was more consciously and directly involved in all this stuff we're talking about that we're dealing with even today, I would say.
In politics, like, they think of him as like a religious occult leader. But if you read my book and you get through that, he had a political philosophy. He believed in freedom, the standard of freedom. He believed in his ideal society was a aristocratic feudal society. He thought it was optimal, run by men, and the cattle shall serve. He almost like the cows are there to use for their leather and mutton, and give them the quiet wisdom of the cow. That's what he thought. Like he had total contempt for other human beings. He was a total, like I said, member of the elite class of upper class England, at that very class conscious country back then, for sure. Still is. But I think that his political ideas people overlook, I think, and that's why I included him in the book.
Do you think that what the intention then, therefore, even particularly from the Thelemite perspective, do you think that the intention of 9/11 was the success now that they intended it to be?
Oh, a blazing success, absolutely. I think they fulfilled almost all of their objectives. Change society, Patriot Act, huge wealth transfer to the elite, to the military-industrial complex, total police state, Department of Homeland Security, change in the culture, maligning Muslims,
destroying a middle class, destroying the middle class, the power of a middle class, because anytime you go from feudal or what have you to a more free society, that usually is brought about by a strong growing middle class, or results in that. So therefore, you have to destroy that middle class if you want to turn us all into serfs again, right?
Correct.
No hope to rise above.
Crowley's definition of magic is to create change in the world in conformance with will. So if their will is to do that, that's what I think they achieved. I think over those 8 years, I mean, if you read about the Bush administration, he would get up every morning. His dad would call him. They would have a 30-minute, an hour call. Bush Jr. is like his dad's lackey, and his dad had tons of experience.
And
I don't know if you,
And let's not forget, the only person that Bush Jr., George W. Bush, pardoned while he was governor of Texas was Henry Lee Lucas.
Correct. And George Bush Jr. has a lost year. I mean, he literally has a lost year. And he called his dad a god. My dad is a god. Like, that's very much of an occult kind of Crowley look.
Wow.
But there's a lost year. I mean, there was lost stories about Bush being on the border towns of Texas and Mexico. And that area is known for occultism, Matamoros, and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Jesus, Adolfo Constanza.
Yeah.
But he's just one of many. That whole thing, narco-trafficking, satanic
right.
trafficking.
Magdalena Solis, the Solis cult.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's
Well,
all kinds of dark stuff there, like the
Hey, can I
Mars
just
girls.
can I ask one question? Now, the pilot episode of the X-Files spinoff, The Lone Gunman, do you think that was planned to be that way or just a happy coincidence?
I think it was planned. There's all kinds of like hints for foreknowledge of 9/11. So that's probably one of those things that came out. But there's
Revelation Method.
foreknowledge in Fight Club, which is a 1999 movie.
The Big Lebowski.
Another 19. What's Big Lebowski's reference? I don't remember.
Big Lebowski. He's going through the checkout, and
That's right.
and it's 9/11, and George H.W. Bush is giving the New World Order speech.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
So
And there's
then you
Matrix.
had Matrix, right? So
Uh-huh.
Matrix, Anderson's 9/11, Fight Club, which is the two towers go down at the very end, 1999. And then Enemy of the State. I think one of the driver's license, it's a 9/11. So it's all there, and I think it's even in Back to the Future as a reference to 9/11. I think so. It's like it's bubbling around through the culture. Like people are like, "Hey, man, something's going to happen," or like people must have just known. And it's like weird things happen on 9/11. Like people died, but like I think it was the guy, Family Guy. Like I almost got on a plane, then I didn't get on. I just survived, you know. Oh, I was supposed to be in the towers, but I wasn't. You know, there's all kinds of weird stories that make you kind of question, like, what the
Right.
what did you know? And the guy who was from Family Guy, if I remember, I don't remember his name, but I think he went to an elite prep school. Like he is from a kind of Eastern elite family. So maybe somebody said, "Hey, you know, might want to stay home tomorrow."
Right.
Well, this is usually where we take questions from the live chat. Are you open for that, William?
Sure.
Okay. So let's open up the live chat. We'll do that for about 20 minutes.
Great.
And remember, folks, please, all caps, if you want us to answer your question or acknowledge your comment, because otherwise it looks like it's just another side conversation. So if you have a question for William or any of us, all caps. So, oh, wait. Oh, sorry about that. Uh-oh. Oh,
Sorry.
no.
My bad.
What do we do?
He'll come back.
Are you sure?
They got cut off or something. So he'll come back.
Wait. Shoot. Okay, wait a minute. Let's try to.
He just clicks on the link and comes.
Yeah, but does he know that? Oh, shoot. Okay.
William,
Hey,
just click on the link again. What's that?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm here.
Todd, can you call him directly and tell him?
I don't have his phone number. He has my phone number, but I do not have his phone number.
Oh, there he is.
Okay.
See, I told you.
Okay. Let's bring him back in.
I don't know.
Sorry, William. That was just a weird tech glitch thing. Sorry about that. So let's go over to somebody did have
We have a bunch of comments. So where do you want to start?
go. Well, let's try to find the first one. There, right here.
Start with Oswald.
Okay, so Oswald Spengler asks, does William know of any direct connections between RFK Jr.'s time in California and that of Crowley Parsons?
Not off the top of my head. Hey, Oswald, I know him, but I don't know. Nothing about RFK Senior or Junior.
All right. Well, I learned something as an evidence tech with the FBI about the RFK case that I still am not comfortable saying publicly, but I'll leave it at that.
The RFK, the assassin, or him and Marilyn Monroe?
The assassination, the forensic stuff. We'll just say.
Oh, yeah. It's all a mess. There's more bullets than one gun. So maybe that.
And where the evidence is interesting. After how many years? At the time, it was 20 years after a case that's already solved.
William Joseph Roman, guys.
Okay, so Michael Dark asks, William, what do you think of the pet goat book being read to Bush, the shrub, by Bush?
It's all part of the ritual. It's all part of the worship and ritual.
Right. Okay, so let's go to.
You should watch that again, like they're playing, hit, building, and then they bow down. Everybody grab your book. They all bow
Yeah.
down before George Bush Jr. Like he's
Jeez.
having a blast.
Oh,
This
sure,
is like
sure.
he's externalizing some kind of ceremonial magic that he knows. So he knows,
And the fact
these
that it's a
kind of
goat.
steps. Yeah.
Asmodeus, anyone, right?
Yeah.
So Philip Blair asks, is it more than a coincidence the Mountain Meadows Massacre culminated on September 11th, 1857?
Nothing would surprise me. I mean, I don't know. That's another. I mean, I was just talking with somebody today about Mormonism and the occult and Masonry and Joseph Smith's Jupiter pendant and all that stuff. But like I said, maybe that 11 number goes back even further into prehistory. I wouldn't know. I know Crowley thought that he was not just influenced by Eliphas Levi, but he was the reincarnation of Eliphas Levi. So maybe some of that stuff goes back, predates that. And Eliphas Levi's ideas bled into modern American Masonry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so next question. D. Dorothy wants to know, William, where can they find your book?
Well, it's been on Amazon a long time. You can get it there. You
go.
can get it at my website, William Ramsey Investigates. And the full title is Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11, and the New World Order.
There you go. There you go. Okay, next question. Do we have...
No, we have some from earlier, but I think we already went through most of them.
think they got answered, or well, we got those. So, William, on the subject of Sir Richard Francis Burton, which is one of my favorite personal topics, one of my favorite personal historical figures, did you find anything on Burton that reflects, a dark character like Crowley, or was he just someone Crowley admired as a young man?
It's a good question. I didn't come across it. I've read some of his stuff into the record, his trying to find Lake Victoria, or his quest to do that with Speak, where he was attacked and all the suffering he went through. He actually talk about Mormonism. He actually traveled to Utah and wrote about that. He was kind of disappointed because he thought he was going to have a better time than he did. There,
I'll send you my book on him because it involves that directly, and I'd be really interested in your opinion from your perspective on what I think Burton. It's titled "The Lost Expedition of Sir Richard Francis Burton," and in my opinion, Utah was a part of a recon trip before he went to his mysterious time in South America. He worked for the diplomatic service down there, and then as he left that post, he disappears for a 5-month period. And as we know, Richard Francis Burton wrote about everything he did, and many times in boring detail, but this is a gap or not a word. But I'll send you my book because
it'd be interesting reading it.
Yeah,
but I mean, he was notorious for partaking in local customs, and also he had over footnoted. Like his footnotes were almost over laborious. And, he was the first infidel to take the Hajj, right? Mecca and Medina, for people who don't know.
Yeah. I can't, is that Lodevchik? It was in 1853 that the 1 mile square town site of San Bernardino was laid out in Babylonian style, a miniature Salt Lake City. Yep, that is true. Brigham Young referred to, how did he put it? About San Bernardino Valley, he said, "Hell reigns there." This place is very weird. I'm not surprised.
It hasn't changed much.
Not at all.
You go down the wrong. I don't know. I hope you're not in San Bernardino, but you go down.
I'm in East Highland. Yeah.
Okay, so you're somewhat close.
I'm in East Highland. More. We got another question here, or so. Okay. All righty. Well, hey, William, why don't you remind everybody again where they can find you, if you have a blog, all your links and stuff, and again, where they can find your books.
Yeah, I have a podcast that is in the top 0.5% podcasts in the world. I signed a contract with Spotify. It'll be almost 2 years in February. So you can see I'm at almost 1,100 episodes on a wide variety of topics.
Oh, excellent.
I've droned on about Crowley, the West Memphis Three, Crowley's impact on the culture, the Order of Nine Angles, which a lot of people don't know about. And then I've just published a book 2 months ago about this phenomenon of serial killings that has all the trapping of occultism called the smiley face killers. My number of victims globally is over 300 who have gone out at night, disappeared later to be found dead in water.
Yeah, that sounds like a reason that Todd and I will probably want you to come back on a future California episode.
Yeah,
I'd be happy to talk about that. It's still happening. They had another death in Chicago. The reason I've published the book is because they had 2 spates of deaths, like 10 deaths in Chicago found in water, and then 5 in Austin, Texas. And Austin was not considered kind of a place where this would happen. So the Austin call it the Rainy Street Ripper. If you've ever been to Austin, Texas, it's kind of gotten that term. And Chicago, they literally had like FBI agents and stuff. They were freaking out because so many people were being found in the waters. But there's even more cases, tons of cases in Boston, New York. So that would be my 5 books. I have 5 documentaries. I have all visual studies on all the stuff I did about 9/11. You can see those on my Patreon page. So if you pay $5 a month, you can just watch all the documentaries you want. And it's more of a visual study. And then you can buy signed copies at WILLIAMRAMSEYInvestigates.com. And you can kind of see some of the other articles I've written in my blog and just on a wide variety of subjects. That's about it.
Okay, well, we will be making sure those links are in the description and elsewhere on the Walter Bosley channel page. I'm definitely going to go check out your perspective on the 9 angles topic. That's been brought up to me, and I know very little about it, but it's something that's intriguing. So I'm definitely going to check out your podcast for that. And like I said, we'd love to have you back on sometime, and thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be with you. Appreciate it.
All righty. Okay, we're going to, let me see here. Am I doing this right? Here we go. And let me, should I do that, right? Okay. Making sure that I doing all the clicks right. Well, hey, Todd, thank you for facilitating William Ramsey being here.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
What a great show. What a great show. Wow.
I do hope that he comes back on.
Yeah.
And, maybe we can get him some boopy glasses. Hey.
Yeah. Maybe if he gives me his address, I will send him some Robert Evans sunglasses.
Robert Evans sunglasses. Yeah. Gotta have those. So,
most definitely. Guys, thank you so much for coming and watching this episode.
Yes.
I just want to remind everybody to buy Walter's books. Walter, you can tell them where to get the great books.
Go to walterbosley.com. That will take you to the links. Yes, they are still printed and distributed through Lulu, but you can go there through walterbosley.com, and we're always working on adding more stuff and improving the site and stuff. But go through there, and you'll see some of my old blog posts and things like that, and also the Ingersoll Lockwood and Margaret Todd books. So there we go. So
and next month's episode of California, are we going to do ninth configuration?
I think so. That's what we talked about.
So join us next month, guys. That's going to be a great conversation. And watch the movie first if you can.
Yes, and it is streaming right now. Make sure you you check it out. So well, Todd, thanks again, and thank everybody for watching. And we will see you next month on California, but we'll see everybody next week, or no, Friday night.
Oh, Friday,
our Friday night stream, right?
Yeah.
TGIF.
Yeah, so we'll see you on Friday. So, okay, everybody, have a good night.